So we know when chimps eat cultivated crops, they get extremely healthy. Okay? So these are the crops of subsistence farmers. So what is subsistence agriculture? Well, subsistence agriculturalists target farm output for survival and for mostly local requirements with little or no surplus. So whenever you hear the term buy local, okay, you're buying from subsistence farmers. You're buying from farmers that are making just enough food to feed themselves and a little bit to sell, not commercially per se, but locally, to bring in enough income to pay their taxes and not necessarily get rich, but to pay their taxes. Now, many subsistence farmers in the United States are quite wealthy, but that's because of the fact that, the United States is a relatively wealthy country. But subsistence farming promotes, when you hear buy local, buy from your local farmer's market or co-op or yada yada, you are supporting subsistence farmers. So, despite the self-sufficiency in subsistence farming, today most subsistence farmers also participate in trade to some degree, although their amount of trade as measured in cash is less than that of consumers in countries with modern complex markets. They use these markets mainly to obtain goods, not to generate income for food. These goods are typically not necessary for survival and may include sugar, iron roofing sheets, bicycles, used clothing, and so forth. Many have important trade So what's the history of subsistence farming? Subsistence agriculture was the dominant mode of production in the world until recently. You'll notice that people did not have the extreme massive amounts of obesity and health concerns and all that until recently. Very recently. When the market, that's what gets me though, is people will say everything's genetic. We did not have this explosion of chronic diseases, and people will say, well, people live longer now. We have an explosion of chronic diseases in adolescence and youth. We have heart disease and diabetes and people in their teens and preteens, for God's sake. You can't tell me that we've changed that much as a species within, the past 20 years. It's not going to fly with me, okay? Now, what will fly is the concept of epigenetics and the way that food and behavior impacts genetic expression. You can't blame this on genetics. It's crazy. In fact, what's funny, Dr. Sean Baker, who I began following Dr. Sean Baker during his ideas of the unspeakable thing that shan't be spoken of. We don't want to get banned here. We all know what I'm talking about. But he was a big supporter of patients' rights. Now, I don't agree with Dr. Baker on the carnivore diet, but I do agree with Dr. Baker a whole hell of a lot on this idea of refined foods, which are literally killing people. And he just did a video, which I did not watch yet, because I wanted to do this video, but I will watch it, on you can't blame this on genetics. It's just not possible. This explosion of childhood, for example, type 2 diabetes. When I was a child, I'm 40. When I was a child, type 2 diabetes was called adult onset diabetes. Now it's called type 2 diabetes because everybody's getting it. You got young children getting type 2 diabetes. Okay? That's not an acceptable way for our country to be lived. This is literally a national security problem. Okay? This is a threat to the national security of the country. So subsistence agriculture largely disappeared in Europe. By the beginning of the 20th century, it began to decrease in North America with the movement of sharecroppers and tenant farmers out of the American South and Midwest during the 1930s and 40s. In Central and Eastern Europe, semi-subsistence agriculture reappeared within the transition economy after the 1990s, but declined in significance or disappeared in most countries by the accession to the EU. Now, what you have to understand, once you get away from subsistence farming, you get away from the ability to feed yourself healthy foods, and you're dependent on the markets. Subsistence farming continues today in large parts of rural Africa and parts of Asia and Latin America. In 2015, about 2 billion people in 500 million households living in rural areas of developing nations survive as smallholder farmers, working less than 2 hectares, meaning less than 5 acres of land. Around 98% of China's farmers work on small farms, and China accounts for around half of the total world farms. In India, 80% of the total farmers are smallholder farmers. Ethiopia and Asia have almost 90% being small, while Mexico and Brazil recorded having 50% and 20% being small. Areas where subsistence farming is largely practiced. Now, I know what people are saying. A lot of these countries have widespread health issues, right? Well, that's not as true as people think. People will remember I covered T. Colin Campbell in the China study, which showed that rural Chinese eating a predominantly vegetable-centered diet were quite healthy. Much, much healthier than the Americans, with much, much less expense spent on medicine. Okay? In India, you, except for the parts where they're eating, where they're getting voluminous sizes due to the, now the thing is in India, they have a culture where they favor fat people. They like fat chicks and all that stuff. I do not. Okay, but that's a thing. So they want to get fat in India. But the thing is, in the majority, the majority of Indians, I do not believe, are experiencing the severe health concerns that the average American is. You will notice that a lot of first-generation Indian Americans are quite healthy. Okay, if you've ever worked, I've worked with a lot of diverse people, so I've got to see people from Africa, from India, from China, from Japan, from Macedonia, from Bosnia, from Serbia. I've worked a lot of factory jobs and a lot of construction jobs where I've got to see these people firsthand, talk to them, and a lot of South American and Central American people that are extremely healthy compared to their American counterparts. Okay? It's just the truth. They're not heavy. They're not tired. They're not relying on 17 cups of coffee to get through the day. They're just in better overall health. Okay, areas where subsistence farming is largely practiced, but that's for first generations. Now, I've talked about the Hispanic paradox. It's not just a Hispanic paradox. It's a Zulu paradox. It's an Indian paradox. It's an Arab paradox. People remember the Yemenite Jews I talked about. It was a Yemenite Jew paradox. But what is the main key factor when these people start eating foods that people aren't supposed to be eating? They get the diseases that people aren't supposed to be getting that seem to be very prevalent in the West. So areas where subsistence farming is largely practiced today is India and other regions of Asia. This is due to processes such as urbanization, the transformation of land into rural areas, and integration of capitalist forms of farming. This is where and how capitalism kills. Okay? And I want people, to, if they have the chance, to watch Deaths of Despair. Because right now, white Americans are suffering immensely from diseases of drug addiction and things like this, and a lot of it has to do with these new capitalist forms of infrastructure which are destroying the cultural, the veins of cultural expression present in rural America and even urban America. It's destroying the American system, particularly in the rural areas. So in India, the increase in industrialization and decrease in rural agriculture has led to rural unemployment and increased poverty for those in lower caste groups, those that are... Now, what's funny, I've watched videos where people, they make this anti-DPRK propaganda where they're explaining how members of the DPRK, meaning citizens of the DPRK, rely on black market methamphetamine to get through the day, okay? That's also true in rural America and has been an issue in rural America and has now spread to urban America for quite a while. You're talking upwards of 50, 60 years now that methamphetamine has been a problem, but it's really picked up since these deaths of despair have kicked off, and the primary cause of that is modern late-stage capitalism, which is fostered by by affirmative action, which has put so many white workers out of work. It's also been foisted upon the American people by things like NAFTA that have destroyed a lot of the farming infrastructure of Mexico and have led Mexicans to have to come up to the United States to work so that they can feed their families, because the farming industry in Mexico has been replaced by the automotive industry, which has essentially enslaved the average Mexican in these areas that used to be farming areas. They're now, not farming areas. Adaptation to global warming. Most subsistence agriculture is practiced in developing countries located in tropical climates. Effects on crop production brought about by climate change. Oh, yada yada. Screw climate change. Types of subsistence farming. In this type of farming, a patch of forest land is cleared by a combination of felling and chopping down and burning trees. Now, I want people to look up the word biochar and Amazonian black dirt. I'm going to go into that in the future, because you know about the black dirt of the Nile, you might not know about the black dirt of the Amazon rainforest. While the land is left fallow, the forest regrows in cleared area and soil fertility and biomass is restored. After a decade, this is why this food is so heavy nutrient dense. Like, a lot of people are worried about pesticides. I'm not worried about pesticides. I purposely do not eat organic food because the pesticides used on inorganically grown food is much safer than the lead, arsenic, and other shit that they allow on the organically grown food. Organic pesticides, so-called organic pesticides, they're not technically organic because they're inorganic materials, but they are far more dangerous than what's being used on the regular crops. But the point is that the biomass and the biochar, this black dirt, or sifted wood ash in some areas that we used to use. If people listen to Joel Wallach, he talks all about this. It's it makes the vegetables and fruits and whatnot, anything grown in that soil, far more nutrient dense. Okay? And we're losing that. We're losing that because when you grow something on the soil and you take it up and you sell it and you don't put anything back into the dirt, the minerals that have gone into those plants to make those plants healthy are no longer in the soil. Okay? So sedentary farming. While shifting agriculture slash and burn technique may describe the method of opening new land, commonly the farmers in question have in existence at the same time smaller fields, sometimes merely gardens near the homestead, where they practice intensive, non-shifting techniques. These farmers pair this with slash and burn techniques to clear additional. So this is their personal gardens where they eat the squash and the corn and the peas and whatnot that they're growing to feed their families, so that they can make profit off of the stuff that they're growing in the fields. However, they're going to be putting their kitchen waste and whatnot in there, which is allowing the minerals from the kitchen waste and whatnot to enter into these fruits and these vegetables, making them more nutrient dense. Such gardens near the homestead often regularly receive household refuse, the manure of any household chickens or goats are initially thrown into the compost piles just to get them out of the way. Now, this is a danger. This is why these things should be turned to ash. But yes, you're putting chicken shit and goat shit in a compost pile, so it's adding those nutrients too, and it's inoculating the soil with probiotics. Nomadic herding is not pertinent to the course of this video, but nomadic herders are people that, herd goats, sheep, cattle, etc. These are the kind of people that entered into India these are the Aryan Indo-Europeans that entered into India, bringing with them what we call the Indo-Aryan cultures, or the Vedic culture. So intensive subsistence farming. In intensive subsistence agriculture, the farmer cultivates a small plot of land using simple tools and more labor. Climate with large number of days with sunshine and fertile soils permits growing. Now, if you ever watch about the blue zones, one of the blue zones is the Nicoya Peninsula and Costa Rica. Okay? You'll notice a lot of the blue zones come from areas, actually pretty much all of the blue zones come from areas where subsistence farming is what they do. I think the only one that doesn't come from an area where subsistence farming is the way of life is basically Loma Linda, California. And that's because in Loma Linda, California, they eat like subsistence farmers. They just don't do subsistence farming. Poverty alleviation. Subsistence agriculture can be used as a poverty alleviation strategy, specifically as a safety net for food price shocks. Now, what's interesting about this, there's a chick, she passed away, old chick, Cooking with Clara, Depression Cooking with Clara. I used to love the videos. She was an Italian woman that survived the Depression, an Italian-American that survived the Depression. She had her own garden, whatnot. Most people during the Depression, my grandparents had numerous gardens where they would grow vegetables, etc. Vegetable gardening is used, again, to prevent against food price shocks, okay, and to promote food security. Benito Mussolini encouraged gardening in fascist Italy for the same reason, to encourage self-sufficiency. Agriculture is more successful over non-agricultural jobs in combating poverty. So keep that in mind. People don't understand this. This is why we're having such a time. Agriculture is more successful in comparison to non-agricultural jobs in combating poverty in countries that have a large population of people without education or that are unskilled. Okay, so this is why in the United States we are having this kind of shock treatment for the uncollege educated white working poor. People don't have agricultural jobs to go to because those agricultural jobs are being filled by migrant workers, okay, who have to fill those jobs because the jobs in their countries have been eliminated by the influx of corporate industry that has essentially made them wage slaves, and the only way out is to migrate up north to take the jobs of the white working poor. So this is what you see going on, and the only people benefiting are the super rich. So there are levels of poverty to be aware of to target agriculture towards the right audience. Agriculture is better at reducing poverty in those that have an income of $1 per day than those that have an income of $2 per day in Africa. Blah, blah, blah. So we're going to move on. This isn't just about, economy, though. This is about your well-being as a human being. So this is an article from this is from PubMed. So, living off the land, how subsistence promotes well-being and resilience among indigenous peoples of the southeastern United States. Indigenous people of the southeastern United States, like the Cherokee, tend to experience the most severe social, behavioral, and physical health disparities of any ethnic minority. So there is a program by the USDA to encourage Native Americans. They should be encouraging rural white Americans to re-embrace the traditional agricultural practices of their forebears. This critical ethnography uses the framework of historical oppression, resilience, transcendence, blah, 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 all that happy horse shit. Historical oppression, yada, yada. American Indians and Alaskan Natives represent a diverse groups of 573 federally recognized tribes, yada, yada. According to the National Health Interview Survey, indigenous peoples tend to experience poor physical health than other racial groups. The people that are that have the poorest health right now in comparison to the past are middle-aged white men, and they are dying of deaths of despair, and there needs to be something done. One of those many things could be the reemergence of subsistence agriculture. In fact, the number of both physically and mentally unhealthy days experienced by indigenous people within a month approached twice that of non-Hispanic whites. Indigenous peoples experience a 4.4 lower life expectancy than members of the general U.S. population, with the leading causes of death being cardiovascular disease, cancer, unintentional injuries, and diabetes. Now, if you look at deaths of despair, same deal, except there's a lot of drug addiction involved, and there's a lot of drug addiction involved also in Native Americans. I don't know why they're not mentioning that. In comparison with members of all races, indigenous peoples experience many of these health problems, including unintentional injuries, diabetes, chronic liver disease, and cirrhosis. Okay, there we go. Drug-induced death, suicide at disproportionately high rates. This is what you are now seeing with the deaths of despair amongst whites. So there is a solidarity, I think, between the white middle class, the former white middle class, what is now the white working poor, and the indigenous people of this country. We have a blue-collar solidarity, if you will. 2/3 of all deaths in the United States are related to cardiovascular disease, cancer, and diabetes. And poor diet and lack of exercise are risk factors for all three diseases. So keep that in mind. As I said, we have seen an explosion of these chronic diseases that are absolutely caused by lifestyle. Absolutely. There would be no other way to explain it. Nobody's genes have changed that much in a decade. Okay? 2/3 of all deaths in the United States are related to cardiovascular disease, cancer, diabetes, and poor diet, and a lack of exercise. These are all risk factors for these things. Thus, a healthy diet and exercise, which you get from subsistence agriculture, are a clear means of promoting well-being, along with mental wellness, life satisfaction, and positive life experiences. The IHS Promotion and Disease Prevention Initiative has identified 5 focal areas for health promotion and well-being: diabetes, nutrition, obesity, physical activity, and exercise, as well as tobacco cessation, highlighting the prominence of physical activity, diet, and exercise. According to the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, well-being at minimum includes positive emotions, the absence of negative emotions, and satisfaction with life, along with feeling healthy and good. It encompasses physical, economic, social, developmental, emotional, psychological, life satisfaction, and employment domains. The inquiry investigates how subsistence relates to well-being and resilience. Subsistence is generally thought to relate to the activities through which food is acquired, processed, prepared, and consumed, what people eat, how they produce it or acquire it, and whether those activities emphasize hunting, gathering, fishing, horticulture, or agriculture. As such, the purpose of this qualitative inquiry is to examine indigenous peoples' perspectives on the experiences with subsistence living in investigating how subsistence living may contribute to well-being, resilience, and cultural connection by promoting physical exercise, a healthy diet, and psychological wellness. Investigations of subsistence living and well-being are essential if we are to eradicate the physical and mental disparities experienced amongst indigenous peoples and white Americans of the United States. In the following sections, they briefly introduce a framework of historical oppression, blah, 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 wah, 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 historical oppression and subsistence, blah, 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 blah. Okay, resilience, rapid social and cultural change through historical oppression is reported at a risk factor for indigenous people, blah, 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 blah. Well-being, this is all socially oriented, not biologically or physiologically oriented. You can read this on your own, but what it's showing is the social resilience fostered when one retains subsistence agriculture. Unfortunately, it is not promoting or looking at the nutritional impact, how the nutrition impacts the epigenome, genetic expression, and these things, and reduces these health concerns moving forward. So this is from the United Nations, and what people need to understand, not only is subsistence agriculture good for people, it's good for the environment. Now, this is the thing that people don't understand. They want to talk about how agriculture is so awful for the environment, blah, 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 blah. It is not. So background, the latest technology and highest contributions of modern scientific world for agriculture sector is a hybrid farming technique, blah, 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 implementation of project, yada, yada, yada. Results and outputs, fertility of soil will never be deteriorated. Rather, it will be restored by subsistence agriculture. This is what you need to understand. People do not understand this. They think that agriculture depletes the soil. Yes, if you practice agriculture like it's being practiced in the modern sense without anything being put back into the fucking soil, yes, it will deplete the soil. If you practiced agriculture as it was practiced prior to the advent of huge industrial farming, where you are putting the organic and inorganic materials back into the fucking soil, it is enriching the soil, not taking from the soil. And you don't need any fancy fucking bullshit like biodynamic farming. You just need to practice regular, normal subsistence farming. Intercropping system is possible, blah, blah, blah. 3 or 4 crops are being produced. No need for more water. And no need of fertilizer. Nutritional contents are more, and the medicinal value of the food. This is the thing. This is what people don't understand. Africa, India, Asia, like China and whatnot. Medicinal value comes from the very food you eat. If you look at traditional Chinese medicine, or traditional Ayurvedic medicine, or traditional Native American medicine, or traditional South Native American medicine, foods are prescribed. Diet therapy is prescribed, and it works. It is very economic for cultivation and easy to harvest. The gender sensitization agenda. So this is the thing. Women and men can learn to work as partners in subsistence agriculture instead of the way that this war between the sexes is being promoted by the new brew of feministas and manosphere weirdos. So, no possibility of infection and palatable for consumption. The market demand is very high due to more nutritional contents. We need better nutrition. It's not about the market demand. People need nutrient-dense, calorie-poor foods to promote health. We've known this for at least 100 frickin' years. Enabling factors and constraints, changing the mindsets of the people from inertia to action for involving them with subsistence agriculture is notoriously difficult because people want money. They don't want nutrition. They don't want health. People will sacrifice their health if it means money. Awareness campaigns, and I was in that boat. I was in that boat for a long time until I worked myself to the point where I realized I'm screwed. Awareness campaigns should be conducted to acquaint the people with this cropping pattern, creation of educative community organizations, village level, and creation of local leaders for involving the people with the project activity depend upon the well-experienced field staff, strengthening the local community and engaging them in subsistence agriculture and providing skill development training or preparation of the land, and biocompost, biopesticides depend upon expert trainers. Sustainability and replicability. Sustainability of the project is a vital part of the process to activate the future course of implementation. The community members should be provided the knowledge how to measure the progress of work it is to be done, strategically given the responsibility of the community during the process of implementation. The community members shall be involved in the process by which they will gain the expertise and skill and will be able to carry out or to carry forwards the activities after the completion of the project period, and all the movable properties should be handed over to the community after the completion of the project. Other sources of information, yada, yada, yada. I don't even give a crap about that. Don't want to get banned, if you know what I mean. Moving forward. Now, subsistence farming, this is why I promote the concept of urban farming as well, the use of indoor urban farming to supplement rural food security, as well as indoor rural farming with greenhouses and whatnot for temperate areas, is because of the seasonality of foods. We can replicate the same foodstuffs. For example, you can grow bananas, avocados, etc. In temperate areas in greenhouses. People know that. Many of the world's food insecure and undernourished people are smallholder farmers in developing countries. This is especially true in Africa. There is an urgent need to make smallholder. Now, this is the thing. They might be undernourished, but they're not suffering from type 2 diabetes at the age of 11. Okay? Unless they're consuming refined foods. African farm households are known to consume a sizable part of what they produce at home. Less is known about how much subsistence agriculture actually contributes to household diets. We use representative data, blah, 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 blah. So on average, subsistence production accounts for 58% of rural household calorie consumption. It should probably, you want it to account for more. During the lean season, purchased foods account for more than half of all calories consumed. Now, what you have to understand is what you need to be introducing these people to is canning and food preservation techniques similar to the Amish and Mennonite communities have in this country. But even during the main harvest and post-harvest season, purchased foods contribute more than 1/3. Now, this is why they are undernourished. That's because they are buying consumer goods and eating them. So despite significant progress in reducing global hunger, yada, yada, yada. Okay, with discussion, da-da-da. Recent studies have reported that market purchases contribute significantly to smallholder diets. So that's the reason why you're having a problem is these market purchases are contributing significantly. When you're replacing vegetables and meat with rice, you're going to have a problem, especially when it's white rice or some shit like that, you know. They address the research gap, blah, 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 results. Let's go down to the conclusion here. So, of course, calorie consumption in rural Ethiopia varies considerably over the period of 1 year, blah, blah, blah. Now, this is the thing. They're saying that undernutrition is widespread among rural households in Africa. What you need to keep in mind is undernutrition or underconsumption of calories with optimal micronutrition promotes health. We know that traditional Zulus are healthier than those that consume consumer goods. The problem is that these people are not taking in their rural diets, they're taking in consumer goods, as you saw earlier. These households do not only suffer from insufficient calorie intakes, but also from low dietary diversity, okay, leading to multiple micronutrient deficiencies. So it's not simply a lack of calories, but a lack of micronutrients. And again, this is where supplementation and things like that come in. Most rural households in Africa are semi-subsistence farmers, meaning that they produce yada, yada, yada. 42% of calories are consumed from the market. That's almost half their calories come from refined shit during the lean season. Okay, the exact numbers from Ethiopia should not be extrapolated to other countries in Africa, however. Ethiopia's small farm sector is known for its relatively high subsistence orientation indeed, so you have other people eating more shit. Household survey data, yada, yada, yada. Calculation of calorie consumption. Okay, common food, blah, blah, blah. Food qualities consumed were converted to calories, yada, 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 da, da, da. Now, I don't support the Weston Price Foundation usually because the Weston Price Foundation usually mangles and misrepresents Dr. Price's findings in his book, Nutrition and Physical Degeneration. But this is a decent article here. The Modern Subsistence Farmer, he's explaining, or this person is explaining, I think it's a chick. No, it is a dude, Neil Ritter. This morning's breakfast was amazing pastured eggs from chickens cooked in clarified butter, bacon from the pigs that they have, kraut, warm milk from the kids, and decaf cappuccinos. Last night's dinner was also delicious, with liver from the cow they processed on the farm 2 days ago, green beans and zucchinis from the garden, and radicchio salad that they made. Okay, BLTs on sourdough, blah, blah, blah. The incredible part, this gourmet menu, and it's true, this is a gourmet menu, you would get this at a fancy schmancy restaurant, is that this is their life every day. So it's a nutrient-dense diet every day, okay? And this person says, I could go about the soups, grain dishes, traditional Italian pastas, vegetable, eggs, cured meats, and ferments that grace their table. All of this abundance is grown on their 4 acres of farm in Colorado. In fact, at mealtime, they often play a game to try to figure out what they are eating that they didn't produce on the farm. Usually it's salt, olive oil, and grains. Okay? What is most remarkable is how easy it all became once they made a fundamental shift in their beliefs around food farming and nutrition. Subsistence redefined. They asked, we define ourselves as subsistence farmers. This may be a little tongue-in-cheek, blah, blah, blah. Subsistence in our mind is practiced is the practice of growing as much of your own food as possible. The wife, blah, blah, blah. Problem arose. Okay, goats, the perfect subsistence animal. The great thing about goats, if you're a dairy consumer, goats are small and they convert greens to milk quite easily, and they live on grass. That's benefits of goats, okay? I am not a dairy consumer, but okay, so they managed to invest in a herd of 6 weaned for under $200, blah, 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 neighborhood rules. Pigs, fat-fueled lawnmowers. And this is another thing. Pigs, now I don't support the eating of pork at all, but pigs are exceptionally good at converting garbage to protein if you're a meat eater. Cows making edible sunshine. So cows transform grass into dairy. Poultry, the gateway livestock. Poultry is everybody's first livestock animal, usually for eggs. And that's the thing is, as I actually do support, if you are going to consume any animal products, I would most likely support the consumption of eggs or fermented dairy, but eggs especially, simply because if they're very nutrient dense and calorie poor. They're a very nutrient dense, calorie poor food, although the yolks can play some tricks on your blood cholesterol levels, but you can also eat the whites. Butchery is the key to subsistence, only if you're a meat eater. You could also eat a lot of beans and a lot of corn. Look at the Native Americans. The garden, focusing on calorie-dense foods. So they shifted. Okay, so they previously grew lots of greens, and they vinegar pickled jars of vegetables, blah, blah, blah. Naked seed squash, yada, yada. During summer, they would eat the vegetable-heavy diet, dressed with butter, cream, and bacon, while in the winter they would shift to hearty soups, stews, and roasts. They eat herbs fresh. Okay, so foraging food for free. This is another thing. Remember I explained, most people that practice agriculture have consistently also practiced foraging and hunting throughout human history. It's only very recently, like post-World War II, and even then, it was only a very small part of the population that even didn't practice some form of agriculture and some form of foraging and whatever. In the United States, I'm talking about, it was mostly people that lived in the cities that didn't do that. So the entry to subsistence living was through teaching primitive skills, identifying edible plants, foraging, yada, yada. There are several that have had a large impact on their diet, foraging for mushrooms and wild fruits, wild game, main imports. So they don't produce all of their own food, okay, so, but they could. If they start using hoop houses and things of that nature, they could, and you could produce vinegar from grapes and whatnot, or apples. Healthy and connected, devoting their lives to subsistence lifestyle has given their family access to nutrient-dense foods, and engaged their children in community and inspired generosity as they share the harvest with friends and family. Okay. So this is about food and agriculture in ancient Japan. The diet of ancient Japan was heavily influenced by its geography as an archipelago. Foodstuffs and eating habits imported from mainland Asia, religious beliefs, and an appreciation for the aesthetic appearance of dishes, not just the taste. Millet was replaced by rice as a main staple found, blah, 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 blah. Buddhism introduced largely prohibited the killing of animals and birds. A wide variety of fruit and vegetables were available, while tea and sake were the popular drinks. Geography and weather. You can read this on your own. Mythology, how that played a role. So, in ancient Japan, as it remains today, was largely focused on cereal and vegetable production, with meat only being produced in relatively limited quantities. But they did eat a considerable amount of fish, so keep that in mind. There was Their diet was based on vegetables and cereal grains. Okay, agriculture was slow to develop, yada, yada, yada. Buddhism encouraged vegetable, fruit and cereal-based diets, as well as legume-centered diets. Keep in mind, Japan has a very healthy population. Okinawans are some of the healthiest people on Earth. Moving forward. When we get back, I'm going to go into the agriculture of ancient Peru, Chile, etc., with the Incan food and agriculture. And that'll be all for this video.